So the point of this video is to do gradients with charcoal, and any honest discussion of gradients has to start with paper, and here's why. Here I have the same exact materials being used on two different kinds of paper. I have graphite and I have vine charcoal. The difference is this is an Arches brand rough cold press watercolor paper, and this is a Strathmore Bristol board. And we can see that there are several differences, the obvious one being that the vine charcoal is very dark here and it's much lighter here, and both of them will blend, but on this smooth paper we get a very smooth blend, and on the rough paper, rougher areas of shading and also grittier smudges. So the important thing is to test your paper, know what you're going to work on first. I'm going to be using mainly fine charcoal and a chamois, probably kneaded eraser, and I'm thinking about another gradient using powdered charcoal, and we'll probably need fixative for this. So I'm going to do a dark to light gradient, and I cut up pieces of artist tape, and I'm just using it to mask out a rocky cliff-like landscape. And artist tape is also a really great material for charcoal drawings. It's very delicate as tapes go. I want to know what I'm working on. So I'm going to do a little test with the vine charcoal. Pretty light, and when we get darker. And with my chamois cloth, I'll just make sure there's not a glob of charcoal on it, and let's see how these smudge. So we can see on the left, this is Stonehenge. It has a pretty nice spectrum from light to dark. It definitely felt a little bit scratchy when I was trying to get a really light touch. The blends are very beautiful and smooth and smoky. This middle one is Arches Hotpress watercolor paper. The dark end of the spectrum is a little bit light. The blends are very smoky and even and nice again. And here's the Arches rough cold press watercolor paper, and everything's quite gritty. But one really beautiful thing about it is, look at that deep velvety black. So down here I'm trying out a watercolor mop brush with powdered charcoal. And I'm just going to take my kneaded eraser and see how erasing interacts with this. The Stonehenge is a little bit resistant to holding the powdered charcoal, and so it's staying pretty light. This middle one, the Arches hot press, it's accepting a little bit more of the charcoal powder, and it erases well. So if there was a mistake, you can probably back off. This one accepts the most, which we would expect because it's Arches rough. It's a really rough paper, but it's also harder to erase. So looking at it all, I'm thinking of a plan for making maybe different kinds of gradients. So here was the Arches hot press, and again what I'm trying to do is go from light to dark, and I really don't want the light to be too much darker than this, which was almost with a completely clean brush. I'm going to start down here with a really light dusting. And then I'm going to pick up a little bit more, and I'll start a little bit higher than right where I want to be so that I can blend it down in case it's too dark. And here I'm getting a little bit more aggressive, grabbing a little bit more of the dust with the brush. And because it's so soft, it tends to just blend out pretty easily. Fixative, it fixes the charcoal to the page. It also adds some grit so that we can build up more and more layers of charcoal on top of what we just fixed. This is SpectraFix. It's an all-natural casing fixative. So I'm going to do a nice even coat all over. And then let it dry before doing another dusting with the charcoal dust. So here's our piece of Arches Hotpress watercolor paper, and I know this will blend really well. For the gradient, I can basically work from dark to light or light to dark, whichever one I want to, because it's still going to blend nicely. One thing I want to avoid is on this very light end, I got some scratches, and that might show through my blending. So I'm going to soften the tip of this charcoal. And to do that, I can grab a piece of sandpaper or a rough piece of paper and just sort of twist and rock around the tip. And it's just taking the sharp edges off this piece. So I basically have a very dull piece. And I'll flip it upside down just because it feels more natural, and start light to dark. Before I start using a lot of pressure, I'm just going to make sure my effect is still working here. Yep, so with just a nice light buff, all of the marks are disappearing, and that'll turn into a gradient. And then again, a fixative break for this one. I like this stuff because it's all natural and really safe. You can even use it indoor without any harmful vapors or anything. You can also use, if if you have hairspray, some people use hairspray as an alternative. And then here's the arches rough. And I hope that this one will be easier and the most straightforward. I want to take advantage of the grit of the paper. So all I have to do is, with a careful touch, get a nice gradation of light to dark. Have you guys ever done like rubbings? Like, that's sort of what I'm doing here. I'm not really trying to make a mark. I'm just trying to rub and let that surface roughness come through and be imprinted with the charcoal.